Osrith. Tagged stood up, calling her over in welcome. The hall, lit by candles, was full of men, of the Pictish warriors, the Griogares and Cambilaich, of the Strathclyde nobles who owned the fortress and had turned to Domhnall. Platters and cups were over tables and men over platters, talking, laughing, roaring loud declarations to one another. It had not got to the singing stage yet, and Osrith promised herself she would be well away up to the stables when that began, for she did not wish the MacGregor and Cambilaich men to remember their feud with her. Yet, as she stood by her comrades in arms, she felt many eyes on her, mainly MacGregor, AMD mumbling and pointing. Tagged pulled her down. "We will be gone tomorrow," he counselled Osrith. "You are with," he pointed between himself and Fergus, "good company." Osrith smiled as Fergus pulled her up a chair and put a wooden plate before her containing bread and cheese. Osrith thanked him gratefully, and yet, they had not stopped to eat all day, and the smell of the food had suddenly made her hungry. And, yes, she was with her friends. Why should she care about them? They were all on Domhnall's side. To the three warriors, Domhnall's trusted men, Fergus got to his feet, however, and clashed her wooden drinking cup and then Tagged's before turning and toasting the rest of the room. One or two of the Cambilaich made to get to their feet, but were pulled back down by others. Fergus grinned defiantly, glugging back the contents. Clearly, they had been drinking longer than Osrith, and so had the men who now joined them, Felim, the man who had knelt to Domhnall that day, Trostan and Uanst. All three were Sainid's household guard, and she remembered them from the feast after her first battle, where Ivar died. Her first feast, where Sainid had treated her wounds. She remembered the touch of the general's fingers on her hand that evening as she waited on the warriors. That same evening Constantine had tricked her to lie next to him in bed, then pushed himself in and out of her. Sainid, Osrith thought, suddenly, pushing her empty plate away. How was he? Did he still live? Osrith! Tagged exclaimed as three men sat round the table with the. You remember these warriors? Osrith looked amongst the men, Picts who she knew, and nodded. She had trained against Felim and Uanst, under Sainid's supervision. But they didn't know her. Osrith? Felim looked confused. But you were. It was over a year ago, Osrith replied. I've grown. I'll say you've grown, commented Uanst, which earned him a thump in the arm from Osrith as Fergus, as warrior in arms, rose to do the same. Uanst took his chair with a nod to Osrith, in acceptance of his insult towards her, and warriors in arms always stood to a slight against one of their own. May I ask ... Sainid? Osrith looked between the other two Pictish guards. The general? He lives, confirmed Felim. He fought Giric but would not fight Eochaid, being Ui Alpin. But we escaped, because we tricked them that we were dead after the last Norse battle. 2 brothers. 2 Norse brothers? Osrith asked, interested, pricking up her ears. Yes, nodded Felim, drinking deeply from his tankard. Attacked Culgis then, went but got no joy from the monks who forced them back from the outer perimeter wall, so they crossed the water and attacked Dunnottar, but were repelled. They've gone all the way back to Eoferwick. We feigned death, Trostan continued. Took 3 bodies, did Sainid, buried them, pretending to be us. But we went to the Picts, and then across to Strathclyde. Many have followed us. Many more will come as Domhnall crosses the land. Eochaid will not expect a battle in winter, and... But the Pictish warrior broke off as the royal chamber door opened. Enarin, the castle's lord, strode first, chestnut-brown hair glowing in the candlelight. Behind him, Domhnall strode, swathed in his blue cloak, looking taller than Osrith remembered. Behind Domhnall, as if in procession, were Constantine, Domhnall, and Grioghair. Domhnall looked magnificent. As one, the men before him rose, giving him respect as befitting his rank. He waited until he had everyone's undivided attention and then spoke. Gales, of the land. There was a cheer from several men, Picts, another cheer, and Cymric. This last group gave the loudest cheer. We have assembled here, at this site, Dund, ceded to our ancestors long ago, that we would be protectors, guardians of this land. Domhnall looked between groups of his Diaparat warriors, all come from many different parts of the country, all there because they wanted him. Domhnall Mac Corston knew Ialpin as their king. Not one man looked from him, not one unwavering in their pledge to serve him. No, Osrith noticed, there was one. Grioghair was staring right at her. Tomorrow, I will join in union with our land. Domhnall continued to look right back at him, still determined she would not make eye contact with Grioghair. She could go, quickly, and if anyone waited for in the hail loft above their horses at this fortress, she would have time to hide somewhere else. Then, Osrith noticed food being brought in. Eat of the land, Domhnall concluded, sweeping his arm in an arc as he announced the meal, which women were bringing and serving onto the wooden tables before them. It seemed to Osrith, as a platter was brought between the 6 of them at their table, to be a boiled sheep's stomach. Fergus, ever keen to eat, used a short knife, holding it like a dagger as he stabbed into the organ. Its guts of meat and oats slilled onto the platter. "Tag guys," Fergus declared. "Even the peasants support Domhnall," commented Tagged, using his fingers to pick up some of the contents and drop a bit into his mouth, before reaching for a small jar, out of which he poured a little of its contents, spirit which burned Osrith's throat, which Phelim declared to be Uischbetha, the welcome water which had used to toast his success in defeating Ivar Lothbroexen, where she had shamed Constantine fighting in his place. The evening played out with as much Tagice and Uischbetha as they could manage, with toasts to each of Domhnall's warriors, with only the Macgrioghair men and the Cambulaich rising in opposition to one another when they were hailed. As singing began, in praise of Sained MacAlpin, of battle, of wars and heroes of old, Osrith followed Tagged out to behind the hall, hanging back as he watered the woodwork, then leaning against it, relieved. She needed to tell someone what Domhnall had charged her with, and she asked him to wait as she did so. But Tagged did not greet her espionage role with quite as much enthusiasm as Osrith had delivered it. "You have had fair warning," he chided her, sternly. Osrith turned to go and he called after her. "Are you not on for drinking? I must sleep, even if you and Fergus can go all night on the pier, and handle a boat tomorrow." She turned to walk back to the stable, but Tagged placed a hand on her shoulder. Osrith turned, preparing to be defensive. But his tone had changed and he put his arms out towards her protectively, unsteady from the spirit. "He does ask too much of you, Osrith. That's all I'm saying." He looked at her up and down. "Considering what has happened to you." But Osrith did not want to hear it. He doubted her, her comrade in war. "You may believe in the Morrigan if you wish." She shot back hotly, "I do not." But almost as soon as she had turned to stalk off back to the hall, she regretted her harsh words to her friend, scorning his beliefs. She had been the cause of pain to flash over his features. Tagged walked past her, without saying anything more, and Osrith watched as Tagged trod the ground and ducked back in, without a backwards look. She sighed as she leaned back against the hall's wooden planks. Her head felt hot, and she regretted, too, drinking the Uischbetha. She should go to sleep, she knew, but... As she crossed the threshold of the hall, Osrith looked for their table. Tagged was seated now, and Fergus and 3 Pictish guards were still there. Should she sit with them again? But, before she had a chance to decide, a hand on her shoulder began to escort her in the opposite direction. Osrith's hand felt for Buea, but it was too late. Grioghair Mac Dungan had pushed her down at an empty table near the royal princes. Osrith could hear Constantine talking matter-of-factly to Domhnall about Dunnottar Castle's architecture and grounds. Osrith's heart began to race and she made to get up, but an altogether different voice came from the man who had been nothing but hostile to her up to then, one of regret, and he sat on a stool a little away from her. "I am sorry my men beat you, girl," he began, his dark red head bowed. "I did not wish it, and I hope that didn't hurt you a great deal." "Nothing I couldn't handle," Osrith replied carefully as she inhaled, pain from her damaged ribs catching her chest. "Just say sorry to Tagged and do as he says." A warning came, in Osrith's mind. He said to stick with Hin and Fergus, do it, even if it means spending all night here. "And, you are a warrior, girl?" "Yes." Grioghair looked up. his hair falling by his ears. "Here, drink." Griogère offered, taking a jug of Uishbetha from a servant, who was clearly taking it to Domhnall's table. The woman's shoulders dipped and she turned quickly, as Aneurin looked in her direction, clearly waiting for it, and he watched as Griogère poured out an aliquot for Osrith into a cup resting on that table, before taking the whole jug to his own lips. Despite her first thoughts screaming from her cerebellum to get up and go, Osrith reached out for the cup, sipping. 88,888,888. Osrith. Tagged stood up, calling her over in welcome. The hall, lit by candles, was full of men, of the Pictish warriors, the Griogères and Caembileach, of the Strathclyde nobles who owned the fortress and had turned to Domhnall. Platters and cups were over tables and men over platters, talking, laughing, roaring loud declarations to one another. It had not got to the singing stage yet, and Osrith promised herself she would be well away up to the stables when that began, for she did not wish the MacGriogère and Caembileach men to remember their feud with her. Yet, as she stood by her comrades in arms, she felt many eyes on her, mainly MacGriogère, AMD mumbling and pointing. Tagged pulled her down. "We will be gone tomorrow," he counselled Osrith. "You are with," he pointed between himself and Fergus, "good company,